Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I am ready to do my full review of sorts on this bad boy. So this is the Project Maxamet PM2 that I recently did all these upgrades on. Now, I've done full reviews of the PM2 in the past. I actually own a couple of PM2s. I have the River's Edge Cutlery Scorpion PM2, and I have the River's Edge Cutlery Avocado PM2. Both of their PM2 exclusives that currently exist I own and carry and use a lot. The PM2 is one of my favorite knives. So this was a fun project for my factory second Maxamet PM2 that I wasn't quite sure what to do with. And it's really kind of made this knife come to life a little bit. I did a couple of videos on it already. So the first was a video of me unboxing all the components that went into the build, and then the second one was the actual build process. And pretty long video because I showed the disassembly and then the acid etching of the blade and then the installation with the scales. When I put the knife together, it did have a little bit of kind of grittiness to the action. It wasn't quite perfect when I stopped the video, but I had it assembled. After the fact, I did disassemble it one more time, and what I had done like a chump is I had acid etched the path of the detent ball. I should have covered that up. So if you watch that video and you see this one before you do yours, put nail polish on that part too. It had just kind of gritted it up a little bit, but I put a little bit of KPL heavy in that kind of track where that detent rides, and just kind of have played with it a whole bunch since, and it's gotten to where it's buttery smooth yet again. So yeah, that's all that's happened since. But I said I would do an update video after carrying this knife a couple of times, which I have now, and it's the first modified PM2 that I've ever actually owned. I've handled a few of other people's modified PM2s, but all the PM2s I've ever owned have stayed completely stock other than the pocket clips. I always swap the pocket clip. This one's actually wearing an MXG Gear pocket clip. We'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, this one I think turned out sweet. I'm really happy with it. The finish on the blade got this interesting look to it because I cleaned it with acetone, like nail polish remover, before using it, and I think it would have been better if I'd used maybe rubbing alcohol or something, or just really wiped it down better in terms of making it more less unique. It's got these cool like discolorations on it, and I actually really dig it. But if you wanted it to just be like jet black and not have that like kind of bubbly looking texture that it ended up with, then maybe use rubbing alcohol and clean it better than I did. Anyway, let's talk about all the components that are now on this knife, and then I'll just kind of go through how it's been a little different from a regular PM2 and what I like about it more, maybe what I like about it less, and all that. So obviously we started with a Maxamet PM2. The only components that still exist on this knife that are factory are going to be the blade itself, although obviously the finish has been modified, and then the liners inside, which include the compression lock. So the liners internally are stock. I suppose you could go so far as to say the washer or the washers are stock, and then also the stop pin and standoff are both also stock. Other than that, everything from lanyard tube, scales, hardware, clip, all that is not stock. So these scales are from Sharp Dress Knives. These are the dark matter carbon fiber with copper in them, and I think they look awesome. They turned out really, really cool. It's just, I don't know, I like copper in terms of its looks, but I don't like copper on knives very often just because it adds so much weight. So the fact that here you get kind of that cool visual copper element, but it's a really lightweight carbon fiber kind of composite, it looks awesome, and it keeps the knife very lightweight. When I tried a titanium scaled PM2 at one point, Flytanium scales, I bought a knife that already had them on it. It was an M390 PM2, very beginning of my channel actually. I had that knife and talked about it. I just didn't like the amount of weight in the handle, because to me a PM2 is meant to be a pretty lightweight knife, and so adding weight to it just made me not like it for what I like the PM2 for. I know a lot of people feel the opposite. They love the sensation they get by adding titanium scales or even brass scales and stuff like that. So for me, this is a great setup in terms of the weight and looking awesome. The hardware on this guy is from Blades We Love. I'm actually not positive what he calls this finish. I just messaged him and told him what I was looking for and had him send me an invoice for it, which was really cool. I just messaged him literally on Instagram, and super cool guy. He provides not just hardware, but he also does like the PM2 Ultra builds, which are like conversions to button locks. He does scales. He does a whole bunch of stuff, really crazy anno jobs, a lot of stuff over there. So this finish is kind of like a bronze finish, but it's got a little bit of a coppery hue to it, which I think just looks really good with the scales. It turned out awesome in my opinion. The blade, obviously, as we've already addressed, I did this acid wash on, or acid etching, and it was about 10 minutes, and the ferric chloride is all it took to do all of this. And Maxamet just gets really, really dark. Got this kind of cool pattern, like I said, from it probably not being cleaned totally properly, but I'm happy with it, and I think it looks great. Total transformation of the finish of the blade for sure. Yeah, so then the last piece, I should have mentioned as well, the hardware set also came with the Lanyard Tube, so Lanyard Tube matches, which I like. The clip is an MXG gear clip. I don't know what they call this clip, but if you put in PM2, it's one of the clips that they list that works for it, and you can just see it on there. I got this clip at first because when I got my Scorpion PM2, I was going to get a black lynch clip. I typically, for the longest time, used only lynch clips on my Spydercos. I really like lynch clips. I think they work well. But I just couldn't find a black one anywhere. And sometimes that's the way it goes with lynch products, is they're just, if you're in between cycles of them, it can be really tough to find one. So I went on MXG's website, and they had them. Actually, now I feel like I'm crazy. I think that's when I got this one. I think I put this one on. I don't know. At some point, basically the same story. I was going to get a lynch one, and then this was in stock. And I had been meaning to try one of these because people like Thomas Moore, who I'm friends with. You can watch the video of me hanging out with him when I was up in Portland. He uses these on like every single PM2. I think he might use a different length because they come in 2 lengths. Anyways, I really, really like this one. I have found that it might actually be my favorite PM2 clip in terms of how it carries and how it feels in hand. This clip is just, it feels really, really good. It's lived on a couple of knives at this point, and it's kind of found its home on here, I think. It just looks great. I like that it's black to kind of match the all dark aesthetic that's going on here. I think it vibes well with the knife, and it just feels great, carries great, and it's really nice. So in terms of like how different this is from a regular PM2, obviously with a regular PM2, let me grab this one, you get G10 scales, and the G10 that Spyderco uses isn't the most aggressive G10 that's out there. There's certainly way more aggressive G10, but it's gritty. This is a grippy scale material, and it's rough, right? And part of why I like the PM2 in a lot of ways is because the sensation I get with it in hand feels really locked in between the shape of the knife, like the ergos, having the thumb ramp, the forward choil, the way that everything kind of locks me in feels very confidence-inspiring. And it makes this knife feel like a hard-working knife. And I've used my PM2s quite hard. If you watch my first impressions video of the Avocado PM2 or the Rec PM2, there, I'll just hold it up so you can see, of this PM2, which I've been playing musical clips a little bit. Now I've got the Magpul FDE clip on here. I'm kind of vibing with that. Anyways, when I did my first impressions video of this knife, I like feather sticked with it and batoned with it, and I love these knives as like outdoor kind of adventure knives. So anyway, the G10 that they use is just gritty and grippy, and that's one of the things that generally I like about the knife. But it gives it a different sensation in hand and in pocket than really smooth scales like this do. This just gives the knife a different sensation overall. The dimensions of the knife feel the same. The corners feel a little bit more knocked down than the factory ones, just barely. They're still kind of cornered off. They're not like super rounded, but it does feel a little bit smoother, softer around the edges, and just the smoothness of the scales in general, I really kind of like. I'm generally a big fan of ergos that lock me in rather than materials that lock me in. I would rather have a smooth handle that I get a great purchase on just because of the shaping of it and the way it lines up in my hand than have a knife that has obsessive, or excessive, I should say, amounts of jimping and texture everywhere to lock me onto it. I'll take the ergos over the texture, right? Now, this still has quite a bit of jimping. I'm generally not a huge fan of jimping, and the jimping that's done at Spyderco, though, is a really fine jimping, and it's put in just kind of the right places for me. It's where my fingers actually land, and it's not like painful to use jimping. It feels nice. So the fact that I've still got those jimping patches here to grab onto, and then ergos that go great with them, I don't find that I feel insecure with this in my hand. It just still feels really confident. It doesn't feel slippery to me. I mean, maybe if my hands were like wet and slimy, but even then, I feel like even though the kind of faces of the scales might not really grip my fingertips so much, the actual like pressure I'm able to achieve around the knife because of the shaping of the handle, I can't see this knife really slipping out of my hand. It's just really, really locked in. So I like this one being smooth. It feels a little bit more comfortable in hand when I'm not out in the woods with it. Like if I'm carrying this around the city, it feels a little more appropriate than the super textured G10 because I don't need that grip for opening boxes. This feels more comfortable. It doesn't feel quite as hardcore as the sandpapery G10. This feels more locked in a little bit for sure, but this feels nicer. Fancier, if you will. So yeah, I really like it in that way. Other than that, the differences are basically kind of in the same vein. Like going in and out of pocket, it feels smoother now because there's no grittiness that you're kind of battling against as the pants go under the clip and into it. Like it's just nice and smooth in pocket. It's comfortable while it's in there. The weight, honestly, it might have shaved a tiny bit off, but not much. It feels, to me, I don't have a scale here. I can't weigh them, but it feels about the same to me. Maybe a hair lighter. Let me switch hands, make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's real close. If it lost weight, it's not a ton. G10 isn't that heavy of a material. Sure, this carbon is going to be a little bit lighter, but ultimately, I mean, it's pretty close. So the weight still feels about the same. It still has the same blade, same ergos. It's just smoother and looks way fancier. And I think the smoothness feels a little fancier too. But that's really the differences. Other than that, this is still a PM2. And that means that I like it because I love the PM2. If this had gained a bunch of weight, I wouldn't be as much of a fan of it. I've learned that from trying titanium. But I kept it lightweight, and it looks really cool and very unique and very different now. And I think it just turned out great. I'm really happy with it. So if you want to see me talk about the PM2 in general, then you can watch my other PM2 reviews. You can even watch, I've done a comparison between the PM2 and the Benchmade Super Freak at one point. That illustrates a lot of where I land on the PM2 as well. But the PM2 is one of my favorite knives, has been for a long time. It's just a knife that I trust, that I like using, that I find fun to fidget with, that works well for me, and that I haven't had issues with. They've just served me really well, and they come in awesome steels. That Scorpion PM2 is in freaking CPM 10V. That's wild. It's a really ridiculously good steel. One of the best on the market at the moment, and it was a totally low price for what it is. And then like this one, CTS 204 P-blade steel, which I really like. It is absolutely a premium super steel in this day and age, and it looks phenomenal in this colorway, in my opinion. I just love kind of the vibe and the aesthetic of this knife. So overall, I'm really happy with each of those PM2s, and this one feels different enough that at least for a while, I'm going to keep this one around, and if I ever do let go of it, it'll be difficult to do because I also modified it. So I don't know, maybe we'll see. I'll do something fun with it at some point, but it's for now, I'm just really enjoying it. I like having it. I like carrying it. I haven't really done much cutting with it, to be honest. I think I've opened a couple of boxes with it. I haven't even like processed cardboard with it. But I know how a PM2 cuts because I've cut with them a ton. So this blade profile didn't change. One thing that is impressive to me, a lot of the times when I've done ferric chloride acid etching on a blade, afterwards it gets kind of a little bit of a rough texture. Not like crazy rough, but you just kind of feel some texture on the blade. This feels every bit as smooth as it did before it went in the etch. And it's like just shocking to me every time I run my finger across it that it stayed this smooth and didn't kind of like rough up the surface at all. And I also haven't even done a strop or a sharpening or anything on it because it retained a super sharp edge. And yeah, it just hasn't needed it. So it's all the way down to the edge etched, which looks pretty wild. Anyway, I like this knife. I think it turned out well. I'm happy with it. It's always fun as well to do a mod project on a knife, and it just makes it feel more like it's yours and you have kind of more of a connection to it. And I don't know, it's also fun, like the experience. You get to kind of feel like a knife maker for a second, even though it's nowhere near like actually building a knife. It's like a little taste of it. And I think, at least for me, I always think it would be really cool to be a knife maker, and I kind of idolize certain knife makers, and so it's fun to have a project and feel like them for an hour while I do the project. Anyway, thanks guys for checking it out. This is the Project Maxamet PM2, as I've kind of named it, and I'm really happy with it. So thanks for checking it out, and I'll see you on the next one.